But if we go back to April 4th, that was Communion Sunday, and we were talking about what Jesus did on the cross for us and how he gave us a new covenant. And as I was going through that, I remember, it's like I wish we had time to talk about covenants and blood covenants and understanding what the covenant is and what Jesus did on the cross and what his blood represented to us and how that signed the new covenant. And so we hear that said a lot and we talk about it, but do we understand really what is that covenant and what's significance of covenants? And so I want to talk about that today. And if we look at Luke 22:20, and I'm going to read off your screen here because I use the New Living Translation, but the Amplified says, "And in the manner he took the cup after supper, saying, 'This cup is the New Testament or covenant, ratified in my blood, which is shed, poured out for you.'" And so a lot of versions refer to it as the Testament. Testament and covenant are the same, translates the same. And so what does that mean? What is that covenant? And we've talked a little in the past about a covenant. But what I want to get more into is the significance of a covenant. And I'll apologize to you. I like to do that a lot up front. This message today is the first part to lead us into understanding the covenants. Okay? So I know some don't like the teaching stuff as much, but this is where we're going to go today to lead us into next Sunday. But so in the Old Testament, the Hebrew word berith is translated into the English word covenant or testament. And berith comes from a root word, which is bara. And bara means to cut. And to cut is suggesting to cut so that an incision where blood flows. And so you may have heard the term cut a blood covenant. I assume maybe everybody's heard that at some point, cutting a blood covenant. And so that's what this word and what it's referring to. And in the United States, we seldom hear of blood covenants being made or cut within the U.S. However, around the world, blood covenants are still made today. And it's mostly in primitive areas, tribal areas, and things of this nature. So in our Western culture, a lot of times we don't grasp the fullness of what that means and what that represents. And so there's evidence of blood covenants being made all around the world, all the way back. And so we'd say, how far back? Well, a lot of scholars believe, and I would believe in agreement with them biblically, that the first blood covenant was made by God in the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve. And if we go to Genesis chapter 3, verse 21, "Unto Adam also unto his wife did the Lord God make coats of skin and clothe them." So God had made a covenant with Adam and Eve within the garden when they were created, when they were in the garden. And that covenant was you can eat of all the fruit, you can eat of everything in here, but there's one tree. There's one tree. Right? And so when that was violated from that one tree, then that covenant was broken. So the instant Adam and Eve broke that covenant by eating of that fruit, they died in spirit. They died with their relationship to Christ. Their spirit was cut off from God. Their spirit was cut off from him because he couldn't be a part of sin. And they broke that covenant that he had with them. So Adam, in a sense, at that point, handed his authority that God had given him to rule and have domain over the earth to Satan. And so that's how it all started. They lost relationship with God. Now God still talked with them, he still dealt with them, but they didn't have spiritual relationship with them from that point forward. What did they do? They went and tried to make coverings for themselves with fig leaves. And then God came and had to sacrifice. The animals had to die at that point in order for the skins to be made for their clothing. So God proclaimed curses. If we go back and read Genesis, I'm not going to read all the scriptures to you today, but God proclaimed curses over Satan. He proclaimed curses over man and the earth. And he expelled Adam and Eve from the Garden of Eden. God killed animals in order to make the coats of skin for Adam and Eve at that time. And so this is the first recorded shedding of blood within the Bible. So it's known that blood covenants have been made all over the world. They are recorded in the Bible. One of the most well-known is the covenant with Abraham that God made with Abraham. And we're going to talk about that more in detail next week. But I believe it's fitting to say that God is the author of the blood covenant. Now, a blood covenant has been distorted in many ways and many things in many areas around the world. And there's a lot of bad, evil things that have come out of the blood, and the blood making these covenants within on the other side of it. But Satan is a deceiver, and what does Satan do? Satan copies or tries to what God does for his benefit to try to deceive people. So the question is, why make a blood covenant? And so blood covenants between men are made for three primary reasons, and that's one is protection. And a weaker person, group, or tribe will enter into a blood covenant with a stronger person, group, or tribe for protection. And if one attacks you, you attack all, or you attack the other. So we're all together for our protection. So if you think about today, we have the NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. That's a group of countries that have come together and made a treaty or a covenant that if you attack one, you attack us all. So we can see that within the world today. They didn't seal it in blood, but that's an example of what we're talking about. They would cut covenants for business purposes. Men and women enter into blood covenants to ensure that neither takes advantage of the other, or they work together for the greater good of both. Even thieves, gangs, and things of this nature, they would make blood covenants amongst their groups against other groups. And then the third reason that blood covenants were made was for love or deep friendship. And if we look at the biblical example of David and Jonathan, in 1 Samuel 18, verses 1 through 5, it says, "As soon as he, David, had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. And Saul took him that day and would not let him return to his father's house. Then Jonathan made a covenant with David, because he loved him as his own soul. And Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was on him and gave it to David, and his armor, and even his sword and his bow and his belt. And David went out and was successful wherever Saul sent him, so that Saul set him over the men of war, and this was good in the sight of all the people, and also in the sight of Saul's servants." So that's an example of the covenant made for love between those two, where their souls were knit. And so blood covenants, have been made over the years, going all the way back as far as we can find in records. They're made in different ways. They're based on the persons or the cultures that are performing the covenants. So some cut the palms of their hands until the blood flows, and they shake hands, and they make a seal of blood covenant by the shaking of hands. I've read where they say this was the beginning of the handshake. That's where the handshake originated. Now I can't verify that. I've tried to, but I can't. But that's what's said anyway. As a kid, you ladies probably didn't do this, but you guys, as a kid, if you ever have a best friend or somebody, you spit in your hand and shake hands to seal your bond or your friendship, or sometimes some will prick their thumb and get blood, and they'll put their thumbs together. We're blood brothers, we're friends forever. Those things take place here. That's a known thing. Some of you look at me like, you're crazy. Maybe it's a North Carolina thing. I didn't do it, but I'm sorry, I couldn't hear. Did you say you did it?
Not the spit.
Oh.
The blood thing, like the finger thing.
Yeah, the finger prick.
But it was with so.
It was with who?
A boy.
Oh my goodness.
Oh. We were best friends.
More information than we... No, I'm just...
Don't ask the question if you don't want to answer.
Point. Goodness sakes, Mondi. As I understand, it was with a friend, but that's what it's all about. That's the whole thing, is sealing it with the friendship and for. So, excellent point, Mondi. I'm sorry, I lost it. I was wrong.
Yes, you were, but that's okay.
Thank you. Others will do a covenant by cutting. They would actually cut on their wrist, and when they do that, they put their wrists together to seal it. And or another way they would do it is they would cut and drop blood in a cup of wine. Each would drop blood from the cut and incision into a cup of wine, and then they would both stir it up and drink half of the cup of wine in sealing and making this covenant. And at times, some of the culture are the ones that would do this. They would rub gunpowder or another ash or another substance into the cut, so that when it healed, it would always leave a dark line showing their blood covenant as a signification that they had made covenant. So there's many different cultural things that were done, and even today in a lot of the African nations, in these tribal areas, that's how they still operate in some cases. So these covenants, when these covenants are made in these tribal areas and between them, they're not just a covenant between the two people, it's between the tribes. It's between them, their families, their children, everybody in there. And these covenants are cut, and whatever they pronounce over them, it's very significant to them and how they uphold them. Some will substitute the blood of animals for human blood, and that's what God used in the covenant with Abraham. So most of the covenants that are made are far more involved than just the simple cutting of, right? So when you're making true covenants, and these tribal covenants and the ones that are made, they're typically done in ceremonial way, and they'll involve a priest or another religious figure based on where they're at. And so the two people that are entering into this covenant, the two leaders, they'll often do some of the following things. They don't do always every one of these things, but these are the recordings of all of the records of looking back at how these covenants have been made over time and through them. But they may exchange clothing, usually an outer garment like a robe or a coat. And this is symbolic that they're offering themselves to the other person or the other tribe or the other family, even to their life. So they're signifying in that they will give their life for the other. Sometimes it's a gift, something that has significant meaning to each of them when making this covenant. They oftentimes will exchange weapons, or what's called the girdle, which is the belt that holds the weapons and all of their stuff. And this signifies that they will fight for each other. They will fight each other's battles, that they're bound to that. They may exchange names. Oftentimes they'll exchange parts of their names or within the tribal parts of it. It's like a wife takes her husband or her husband's name and something of this nature. God changed Abram's name to Abraham when that covenant was made, right? Both people making the covenant stand before witnesses and they proclaim the terms of the covenant. And then they seal the covenant by the shedding of blood. That's the sealing of the covenant. And they would use maybe one of the methods as we just covered before. And another method that is used is splitting the animals in half and walking between the halves of the animals, which is signifying that may God do this to me and more if I break this covenant with you. That's the significance. Some of them walk in figure eights through the halves. These are just different ways that these are done. Both of the people making a covenant will pronounce the terms of the covenant, but they'll pronounce blessings over the others for maintaining and being a part of the covenant, and they will pronounce cursing or a curse over the others should they break the covenant, as they set the terms of these covenants that are sealed. So they're blessed for maintaining it. They're cursed if they break it. And breaking a covenant, especially like in a lot of the tribal areas that we're speaking of, means death. You break the covenant, you die. And that sometimes means an entire family. It could mean the member that broke it, but they're very serious. They're not joking when they make these covenants. After this, they share a covenant meal. They break bread. They drink wine. They break the bread and offer half to each other, signifying their bodies, and then they drink half of the cup of wine, representing their blood. Does any of this sound familiar of anything that we ever do or have seen in the Bible or any stories within the Bible? After this, a memorial is made, and this is a sign to remind them and all future generations that they are in covenant with this other group, this other tribe, this other person. And then their blood or the blood of animals, whatever they used, are often sprinkled on these memorials as a reminder of this and that it's a blood covenant. And these memorials, they could be piling of rocks, they could be planting of trees, and in some cases they exchange livestock, herds of livestock of different kinds. So there's a lot of different ways that these covenants were made, and in some places still are. Has anyone ever heard of Dr. E.W. Kenyon? I'm not seeing a lot of eyes lighten up. E.W. Kenyon was a minister back in the late early 1800s.
No, we didn't know because we weren't alive like you.
Say again? I thought that's what you said. No, but he wrote a book. It's called The Blood Covenant. And if you get a chance and you're interested in understanding some of the history and the blood covenants and biblical, how it ties and how all this comes together, he has an awesome book on it, and it's called The Blood Covenant, Dr. E.W. Kenyon. And so he tells a story in this book early on, and I just want to kind of bring it, that Dr. Livingston and Sir Henry Stanley were on a mission trip to Africa. And it was actually Dr. Livingston had gone on this mission trip, and then he was missing. And Sir Stanley had gone over and was trying to find him because they lost track of where he was or what was going on. And they were fearing he was dead. Sir Stanley was not in good health. Sir Stanley traveled with a goat because the goat's milk helped him with his medical or his health condition at the time. And as they were traveling, they came against this strong tribe. This is in Africa. And they came against a strong tribe there. And his interpreter suggested to him that you need to cut a blood covenant with this tribe, because that's the only way you're getting through here. And he resisted it at first, and then finally he realized the tribe people were going through their caravan and just taking their stuff. And they were doing different. And so finally he was like, you know what, okay, let's do this. So as a part of this, when they decided to make this covenant, each party had to give each other a gift. Well, the chief wanted Sir Stanley's goat. And Sir Stanley's not wanting to give up his goat. But he realizes that, okay, in order for us to get through here and keep, I've got to give my goat up. So he gives up the goat to the chief. Then the chief in turn gives Sir Stanley a 7-foot copper-wound spear. And so Sir Stanley's thinking, I just lost my goat for this copper-wound spear. He's not impressed. And so they move forward with the covenant, and each of them had a stand-in for them. So when the stand-ins come in, the wrist of each man was cut. They put drops of the blood in a cup. They mixed it, and the two drank half of the cup together. Then they rubbed their wrists together to mix the blood. And this is how this covenant was made with them. Then after that was finished, each man, they pronounced the terms of the covenant. They had the blessings, and then each man had curses pronounced over them as to what would happen to them if this covenant was ever broken. So Sir Stanley, after this is made, realized people quit taking stuff off his caravan. The people wouldn't go near his caravan. The people wouldn't mess with him or his people. And then as he starts traveling through Africa, he found that wherever he went with that copper-wound sword, people would bow to him. the other tribes would bring to them, embellish them, help them, whatever they did. And at that time, Sir Stanley realized the true meaning and power within a blood covenant that was made between those tribes. It meant everything that he had was in covenant with this big chief. So he said in Africa, these tribal covenants, they say they're never broken. And because the penalty for breaking it is death. And they'll say that parents will, if their children do something that breaks the covenant, they will give their children over to death to the other tribe because they broke that covenant. They're that serious about their covenants over there and what they mean. It is truly life and death. And so I'm going through all of this, and I know it's kind of academic and it's not as much, as what we would like. But in order for, I don't have time in a service without keeping you here for a long time to really enter into now tying all of these together. And so what I wanted to do is present you this as so that you have this in your mind. You understand now what they do and what these blood covenants and how serious these covenants, where they originated. And I firmly believe all the way back to God, because we'll see, I want to talk more on this next week. We're going to start now looking at the Bible and the covenants made with God and Abraham, and then what Christ did with us and his covenant signed in blood as we go to the cross. So what I'm hoping here today, it's kind of like, when you go to school and they cut you out early. We're going to cut you out a little bit early today, and we'll get Sunday school started, because what I wanted to do with this is, and I'm hoping that you're seeing as we're going through these covenants, all the way back from Genesis, all the way back from the beginning. And then if you know the stories, if you've read the stories, start thinking about how these covenants are made. And it all goes back to a lot of the things that these tribes, these people that through the ages have done up to today in these covenants. It all goes back to the very beginning. How did they know to do the things they're doing? Where did it come from? Why are they doing memorials? Why are they doing all these things? And we go all the way back to the Garden of Eden, and we have a little bit of limited. We know that animals had to die for the clothing to be made. We didn't get a lot of detail of other parts of it. But then we go to Abraham, and we get pretty good details on a covenant that was made in a blood covenant using animals. And so just kind of think about that in your spirit a little bit. Think about some of the things that we put out today as to how they're made, what they're made, why they're made, and the seriousness of them. And then next Sunday, I want to kind of let's dig in then to Scripture and dig into what that significance and what that covenant means and what Jesus' blood did and the significance of it when we say that he signed a new covenant in his blood. And that's what his blood represents. Amen?
Amen.